to listen. If we were counseling one of our children and my daughter was trying to tell her problem, I'd try to interject and say, well, here's what I think. And she'd say, Keith, knock it off. I want to hear what she has to say. So people she worked with realized her countenance was her quiet warmth, her quiet strength. And they oftentimes told me they went by her desk just to see her smile if they were having a bad day, because she'd say something kind. She never said an unkind word about another human being as long as I knew her. Even when she was struggling, she never said an unkind word, never complained, and more importantly, never blamed God for her problems. And to see all that and live through that is remarkable. And we met when we were 2 years old. It's all in the book. Back in the day, there wasn't a washer and dryer in everybody's house. It was the clothesline. And at 2 years of age, my parents lived on one street, she lived on another, and our backyards abutted with a chain link fence. Her mother would be hanging out clothes and mine would, and we'd be playing. I'd be trying to touch her through the fence. So even at 2 years of age, I knew I had a girlfriend on the line, but didn't really see her again until high school. And I saw her. She came in a room where I was, and I was on like a bleachers type of set, and she came in with two friends, and all I saw was the back of her head, her long chocolate brown hair and pale skin, and I was in love. It does happen. Love at first sight, even the back of the head.
Love at first sight. I like that. Good.
Love at hindsight. I mean, I'm looking at the back of her head. But it turned out, and I had to really fight to get her, because she was a beautiful girl, and I was just Keith Merritt. So, but I did win the day. We had three beautiful children. She raised them. Just her great love was her family and her children, and she was an avid scrapbooker, very avid scrapbooker. And as a matter of fact, when the surgeon told me that the cancer had spread so bad that she was terminal, that's a story itself, and I'd like to tell that in a moment, but the only time she ever told me anything to do in her illness when she was dying, ever, was when I told her what the surgeon said about her chances of survival beyond 4 months. She took a deep breath and said, okay, here's what I want you to do. She had a whole room of scrapbooking. There's three girls whose husbands aren't so supportive of their love, with equipment and cutters and different little tools. She said, you call those girls and you let them come in the room and get everything they want. Don't charge them a thing. Let them have it all. That kind of person.
Yeah. And
so I did. Exactly. They got carloads of stuff. Very happy girls.
Well, so to go ahead and tell us about now. So you both have your faith in God.
Correct.
You get that terrible blow. Of course, we all know that God can perform miracles, but at that moment, you've been struck with a hammer blow. Mm-hmm. So tell us how that unfolded.
I'd love to. The oncologist said at the end of the test, he looked her straight in the eye. First thing he said was, there is no cure for pancreatic cancer. And I think it went right over Gail's head, but I got it. I read 10,000 pages about pancreatic cancer and saw the hope or lack thereof in treatments. So we made a profound decision right off the bat. We left the oncologist's office, went to have lunch, try to eat, and we made a decision to air it out. Just tell everybody what you have. Because we all know people. If you don't tell people what you have, pretty soon somebody thinks you've got leprosy, and it's all over town.
Right.
I'm being funny, but it's the truth.
Sure.
So the best thing to do is air it out. So we told everybody at church. She called her mother, wanted to tell her. And what that did, it unleashed a flood of prayer from every corner of the globe. I got emails from Portugal, from Spain, from churches and prayer cards from here in Belden, California.
Now, let me stop you right there. How did you know people in Portugal?
No, what was happening was the emails, when I'd send out email updates, and as I said, they're all in here, and they're very graphic. Whatever happened that day, I told. Whatever test. People would send that to their loved ones around the world who were suffering or in the military or whatever. And after she passed, I got emails back from people saying they were suffering through certain ailments, and it helped them get through their day, seeing what we were going through. Amazing, amazing stuff. It just went everywhere. And it became a story in itself. That's why it became a book. And by airing it out, again, back to that moment, we told everyone what we had. But it also brought God into our decision-making. One friend of mine said one day that he didn't like people feeling sorry for him. He had a loss in his life. And he said, I don't like people feeling sorry for me. I said, what's wrong with that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people feel sorry for me every day when they see me sitting in church and they know Gail's not there. That's okay, because when they feel sorry for you, they pray for you.
Yeah.
And that's where the real benefit is, prayer. And the one story I wanted to mention, very important in this book, about how God is for each and every person. Okay, I can't reassure you enough that what's said in the Bible, how biblical it is, how important it is to realize and understand that God is for you wherever you are in life. When the surgeon told me that Gail was terminal, he was actually had a laparoscopic camera in her navel looking in her abdominal cavity and was talking to me from the operating room and said, this is what I see. He said, let me say, it looks like if you dipped a paintbrush in paint and splattered it on the wall, that's what it looks like. Paint splatter everywhere. Tumors everywhere. So when I hung up with him, I'm standing in the room at the hospital looking down at Garfield Street for local people. And my knees were absolutely knocking. And in this moment, I thought I had faith. This is when I knew I had faith. I cried out to God, out loud, talking. God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I have to tell Gail. I have to tell her mother who's on the way. I have to tell my children that, he said she's got about 4 months to live. I don't know how to do it. I'm scared to death, God. You've got to help me. And before I finished that prayer, the phone rang. And in the hospital, in the old rooms, it's a 5-alarm phone. And it was a woman from our parish named Dawn Steinman, who is a very, very faithful person and just loved my wife, and she loved her. She was in Nashville about to go to a family reunion, stopped, came back inside, and called me at the hospital. She said, Keith, this is Dawn. I heard Gail's in the hospital, and before I leave, what's going on? Mm. I told her. She cried. I cried. She said, you're going to be fine. I'll be home in a day or two. I'll come see you. When I hung up the phone, I realized that God had her dialing that phone to reassure me before that prayer left my lips. Mm. He is so good. He is so faithful. If God himself had appeared, I probably would have fainted. Huh. So what does he do? He sends people into our lives to give us reassurance, to hold our hands. It could be an angel for all we know, a stranger, but he comes. And I know I'm not the first person to say this, but I coined a phrase in the book: God answers prayer at the speed of the need. And he did. And he continues to this day. It's had a profound effect on my life. I'm completely different than what I was 5 years ago as far as my walk with the Lord every day. And it had a profound effect. And so my affirmation to each of you who are watching or listening is that God makes promises to us of loving us, answering our prayers, caring for us every moment. He's sitting beside me right now. He'll be walking with me out that door. He walks with you. I'm just a lay person. And if his promise is kept to me, it's kept to everyone. So my best advice is to read this book, to see the affirming love of Jesus Christ, and how he, to your point, the Christian knows that God can perform a miracle to the moment of death, yet he chose to let Gail's life come to its natural end. So what did he teach us in watching her go to her end? And it was his mercy in the quiet moments. The last 3 days of her life at the hospice house, she had no pain medication. She was taking Dilaudid 6-7 times a day. That's very high strain of morphine, because pancreatic cancer is extremely painful. If it gets away from you, it's a whole different story. So you can't let it spike. She got out there. The nurses wanted to put the little belt around her that you push the button, get a little spike. Had no pain. Mm. After 2.5 days, I called the oncologist at home, and I said, Doc, she hadn't had any pain medication for almost 3 days. He said, do what? And he thought about it, and he says, I have no answer for that. And I said, I do. God just took that pain away. He's so very faithful. His mercy is so very kind and pure.
And so she was lucid that whole time?
The whole time. She sat there for 3 days, smiling her big smile. People came and went, sang music, read scripture, brought her testimonies of how much she meant to people in their life. And she smiled gracefully through the whole thing, never complained, had no pain. And when she died her last breath, she went straight to heaven as peacefully as you can go. I saw God. I tried to tell my children, if all you ever know about God is the power that gave her to get up off the couch, walk down the hall of our home to the car to go to the hospice house, and never look back. She didn't look back at the puppy or her home, nothing. She was so ready to go to the cross. She smiled all the way out there, completely, utterly ready. Now, who can walk away from their life? When you read about it, or when you see it, it's a whole different thing.
We're talking with Keith Merritt. He's written a gripping book. You can hear the power of it in his words. Written a gripping book called Emails from Heaven, One Couple's Journey from the Altar to the Cross, just published a few months ago by Cathedral Foundation Press. I want to make sure our listeners know, Keith, where can they get a copy of this book? I think a lot of our listeners are going to want to buy maybe a copy to read and maybe a copy to give to a friend.
Yeah, several people tell me they bought copies to give to people in line at a Walmart who are struggling. They just get, because it's an uplifting book. It's on Amazon.com and cathedralfoundation.org, and here locally in Tupelo at Reed's Bookstore. But Amazon.com is probably the quickest and easiest way to get it. The book only costs $15 and a little shipping. It's a great Christmas gift. But I'll tell you, for the Christian, it's where the rubber meets the road. It is a true story. Everything in it is true.
Keith, we're almost out of time, coming up on a break in a little bit, but can you give us any examples, maybe a short example of the kind of emails that you got in these exchanges? Just you don't have to read it. Just
no, they're not in here. The ones I got weren't in here. They were short little blips. They would say, "Hi, I'm so and so from I'm in Portugal, and my son-in-law or somebody lives in the States and sent me this, and my wife just had the heart attack. She's suffering. She's afraid." And when we're reading your emails, it helped us deal with our fear, because Gail went through some graphic suffering in here, and so they would respond to that kind of thing, that we're suffering, she's able to get through it today, I'm able to get through it today. Thank you for sharing your story.
So this is kind of like most of us who have gotten emails know what this is like. You get one forwarded from somebody who had it forwarded to them. So you go all the way down to the bottom, and there's the original email. And that would oftentimes be your email, where you would send it out to loved ones, and then they had forwarded it, and they had forwarded it on. And what's fascinating about that is that God has ways to get encouragement. You talked about the phone call that you got from a friend, and yet God had worked to get that encouragement to you via the phone, and now you have emails that people got in Portugal and other places. God arranged to get those messages to them,
and that's why this is a book. God wanted this a book. There's no other way to look at it. He's been too wonderful and been blessing me every step of the way. There are people out there in the United States who have published a lot of books who are interested now in helping me get it to a wider audience. A lot of things are going on right now. This may eventually change to a second edition. I don't know, but it's going where God wants it to go. It gets into the hands of who He wants to read it, and that's the best thing I can say.
Keith, thank you for being with us today, sharing the story. I think our listeners, Ed, are going to be really interested in this book.
Absolutely.
Emails from Heaven by Keith Merritt, available on the internet, available from Cathedral Foundation Press, available through your local bookstore. Keith, thank you again
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, fellas.
For being with us
God bless
today.
you
so much.
And now we do have Matthew West, who is here for Operation Christmas Child.
That's right. Most of our listeners are familiar with singer Matthew West, contemporary Christian music singer. Familiar with some of his music, like My Own Little World, Strong Enough. And today he is joining us to discuss Operation Christmas Child. And for those who've been listening for the last several weeks, they know that Operation Christmas Child is a ministry outreach of Samaritan's Purse. If you're not familiar, you might have heard that name. Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham, is over Samaritan's Purse. So, Matthew, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. It's good to talk to you today.
And tell us a little bit about your part that you're playing, what Operation Christmas Child is about, and what Samaritan's Purse hopes to accomplish through it.
Well, for those who haven't heard of Operation Christmas Child, although I think you'd be hard-pressed to find some